There's a conversation happening inside the Cleveland Browns organization right now, and most people don't even realize it's taking place. It's not about the coaching staff, it's not about the playbook, it's not even about whether Shedeur Sanders has what it takes to lead this franchise. The conversation is about a wide receiver who has been quietly, consistently, and almost impressively failing at the one job he was brought here to do. And the numbers backing that up aren't just bad, they're historically, legendarily, embarrassingly bad. The front office can't keep looking the other way. Cleveland deserves to know the truth about what's actually been happening on that field, because once you see it laid out in front of you, there's no going back to making excuses. Let's be real about something from the jump. When a team invests in a wide receiver and hands him the role of #1 target, there's an unspoken contract. You're gonna get the looks, you're gonna get the volume, you're gonna get every opportunity to prove that you belong at the top of that depth chart. Jerry Judy has received all of that and more in Cleveland. The quarterbacks have trusted him, the coaches have schemed for him, the front office has stood behind him, and week after week, drive after drive, he has handed that trust right back, usually in the form of a ball hitting the turf, or worse, popping straight into a defender's hands. This isn't a rough patch. This is a receiver showing you exactly who he is, and Cleveland needs to start listening. 8 drops, 6 games. Let that sit for a second before moving on, because that number deserves more than just a passing mention. 8 drops in the first 6 games of the season is not a stat line that belongs to a starting wide receiver in the NFL. It's not even a stat line that belongs to a fringe roster player fighting to keep his job. That number is the kind of historic threshold that gets receivers benched, traded, or cut in most organizations. In Cleveland, it somehow kept getting glossed over, buried under injury reports and offensive line conversations, as if the elephant in the room wasn't wearing a Browns jersey and dropping every third ball thrown his way. To understand how severe that number actually is, you have to put it in context. Drops happen in the NFL. Every receiver has them. Nobody catches everything. But when you're consistently putting up 2 drops per game and your quarterbacks are still feeding you double-digit targets because the coaching staff refuses to pull back on the volume, something deeply broken is happening. The trust being extended to Judy isn't being earned. It's being wasted. And the people paying the price aren't the coaches making the decisions. They're the rookie quarterbacks standing in the pocket, delivering the ball on time, on target, and watching it fall incomplete because the hands on the other end couldn't finish the play. 8 drops in 6 games doesn't happen by accident. It doesn't happen because of bad weather or tough matchups or a receiver going through a confidence dip. It happens when a player has a fundamental, recurring issue with securing the football, and no amount of coaching, encouragement, or extra reps seems to be solving it. This is a pattern. Patterns, unlike slumps, don't fix themselves with time. They reveal themselves more and more clearly the longer you keep watching, and anyone who was paying close attention to Cleveland's early season games saw exactly what this pattern looked like in real time. Every Sunday, the same story played out. Shedeur Sanders would go through his reads, work the pocket with impressive poise for a rookie, find Judy in a position to make a play, and release the ball. And then the stadium would hold its breath, because by that point, even the casual fans in the upper deck had figured out that anything thrown in Judy's direction was a coin flip. Sometimes he'd make the catch, most of the time, something would go wrong. The ball would bounce off his hands, graze his fingertips, or pop up in the air like it was trying to escape, and Cleveland's drive would die right there. Another possession wasted, another chance for the offense to build momentum gone. Numbers in football can be twisted and spun in 100 different directions, depending on who's doing the talking. Coaches use them to defend their players, analysts use them to push narratives, fans use them to argue on social media. But every once in a while, a stat line comes along that is so clear, so unambiguous, and so utterly damning that no amount of spin can make it look better. Jerry Judy's numbers this season are exactly that kind of stat line, and once you see them laid out in full, the idea that this situation is anyone else's fault starts to collapse completely. Start with the target numbers, because that's where the story actually begins. Judy ranked 22nd in the entire league in targets. 22nd. That means Cleveland's quarterbacks were throwing his direction more frequently than the majority of starting receivers in professional football. He was getting volume that most receivers would dream about. The offense was built around getting him the ball, and the coaching staff was sending him into coverage situations designed to create advantages. From a schematic standpoint, everything was being done to set this man up for success. And what happened with all those targets? He ranked 40th in catches. Out of all the receivers getting that kind of volume, Judy was turning those opportunities into completions at a rate that put him nearly dead last among high-usage receivers. The gap between 22nd in targets and 40th in catches isn't just a numbers discrepancy, it's proof of a systemic failure to convert opportunity into production. You're getting the ball thrown your way more than almost every receiver in the league, and you can't even crack the top 40 in actual catches? That's not a usage problem. That's not a scheme problem. That's a hands problem. Go deeper, and the picture gets even worse. Receiving yards ranked him 46th out of 81 qualified receivers. Yards per catch put him at 49th. In a league where receivers are expected to create after the catch, extend plays, and turn short completions into chunk gains, Judy was sitting near the bottom half of the entire league in both of those categories. He wasn't just dropping balls. He wasn't just failing to catch things he should have caught. He was also failing to do anything meaningful with the balls he did manage to hold on to. The production, top to bottom, was a disaster. But the single most damning number in the entire conversation is the passer rating generated when targeting Jerry Jeudy. When a quarterback throws to a wide receiver, the NFL tracks the resulting passer rating to show how that receiver is impacting his quarterback's efficiency. A good receiver makes his quarterback look better. An elite receiver can turn a game manager into a dangerous passer. A bad receiver drags a quarterback's numbers down and makes every throw look worse than it actually was. Judy's number in this category was 44.2. Out of 81 qualified receivers in the league, that ranked him 80th out of 81. There was literally one receiver in the entire NFL making his quarterback look worse than Jerry Judy was making Shedeur Sanders look. One. And Cleveland's front office kept writing his name into the starting lineup every single Sunday. There are moments in sports that crystallize an entire conversation, plays that when you watch them, stop being about one missed opportunity and start being about everything that's been building for weeks, months, or even years. The play that happened during the Bengals game is exactly that kind of moment. It didn't just illustrate what was wrong with Jerry Judy's season, it perfectly, brutally, almost poetically summed up every concern that had been swirling around him since the first snap of the year. Fourth quarter, third down. The Browns needed this conversion. The situation was as straightforward as it gets in professional football. A simple sit-down route, the kind of receivers run in practice hundreds of times without a second thought. Flacco was under center, a veteran who'd seen every defensive look imaginable, a quarterback who's been in clutch moments more times than most people can count. Flacco went through his progressions, worked the pocket, found Judy settling into his zone, and released the ball. Clean read, good decision, accurate enough throw. Now, to be fair, and this is worth acknowledging before going any further, the ball came in a little low. Flacco's release wasn't perfect on that particular throw. The ball dipped slightly below where a receiver would ideally want it, which meant Judy had to go down to make the play. That extra degree of difficulty is real. Giving credit where credit is due matters in these conversations. But here's where the story takes a turn that nobody who was watching could fully process in real time. As Judy went down to make the catch, the ball hit his hands and then exploded back into the air. Not a graze, not a tip. The ball made contact with his hands and launched straight up like it had been catapulted. And as it hung in the air for that half second of complete disbelief, a defender was right there to pick it off and walk into the end zone like he'd just been handed a present. The stadium went silent, not the frustrated, groaning silence of a tough play, the stunned, confused silence of people trying to understand what they just witnessed.
The issue with that play wasn't just the drop.
Receivers drop low balls sometimes. It's a difficult catch, and there's no shame in missing one. The issue was what happened after the ball hit Judy's hands. A ball that should have either been caught or fallen incomplete somehow became a perfect gift to the defense. That doesn't happen by accident. That requires a very specific and very consistent failure to properly secure the football, a recurring mechanical flaw that keeps turning would-be incompletions into live balls that defenders can pick off. Judy has demonstrated this tendency not once, not twice, but enough times throughout this season that it stopped being surprising and started being expected. Watch the play again and pay attention to the defender's reaction. He doesn't even have to work for it. He doesn't lunge, dive, or fight through contact to make the interception. He simply positions himself near where the ball is descending and waits for Judy to deliver it directly into his arms. That's not a brilliant defensive play. That's a receiver doing half the defensive back's job for him. Cleveland was on the wrong end of one of the more stunning individual receiver failures of the entire NFL season, and the man responsible walked off the field like it was just another incomplete pass. Here's where the Judy conversation gets genuinely uncomfortable for anyone who's been defending him, because the argument that this is a down year, a rough stretch, or a product of poor quarterback play runs directly into a 5-year wall of evidence that says otherwise. This isn't a new problem. This isn't something that developed after he got to Cleveland or started throwing passes with a rookie under center. The inconsistency, the drops, the failure to convert targets into production, all of it has been present throughout his entire professional career, and the numbers make that impossible to ignore. Go back to 2020, his rookie season in Denver. His catch rate ranked second in the entire league that year, second best in the NFL as a rookie. That's the version of Judy that Cleveland thought they were getting when the trade happened. A young receiver with elite potential, a lightning-quick route runner who could separate from coverage and make difficult catches look effortless. That rookie season suggested a receiver on the verge of something special, and the football world took notice. Then 2021 arrived, and the catch rate was still elite, 91st percentile, back-to-back seasons of elite ball security at a young age. The trajectory looked steep, the potential looked real. Denver looked like they had found a genuine #1 receiver for years to come. But sports have a funny way of showing you the truth, right when you think you've got it all figured out. In 2022, the catch rate ranking fell to 100th. Not terrible, but a noticeable step backward from the elite levels he'd posted in his first 2 seasons. Then 2023 came, and it dropped again, falling all the way to 142nd, and then 2024, the year that was supposed to be his genuine breakout, the year everything clicked and he became the receiver everyone believed he could be. His catch rate ranked 131st. In what was framed publicly as his best season, he was still finishing below average in one of the most fundamental skills a receiver needs to possess. 5 seasons, 5 rankings, a clear, undeniable downward trajectory from elite to average to below average, interrupted only by occasional flashes of the player he was supposed to become. This isn't a narrative built on cherry-picked stats or biased analysis. This is his career, laid out exactly as it happened. And when you look at it that way, the idea that Cleveland just caught him at a bad time feels a lot less convincing. What Cleveland caught was a receiver who has never, not even once across 5 professional seasons, has managed to be truly reliable when his team needed him to be. The most frustrating part of that 5-year arc isn't the decline itself. Plenty of receivers fail to live up to their draft pedigree. That happens. What makes Judy's trajectory uniquely difficult to accept is that the tools were always there. The route running, the speed, the ability to create separation, those things never went away. He could always get open. He could always beat his man off the line. The problem was always the same thing. When the ball arrived, something went wrong. And after 5 years of that happening at increasing frequency, the reasonable conclusion isn't that he's been unlucky. The reasonable conclusion is that this is who he is. This is the part of the conversation that Cleveland's media, fan base, and frankly the front office itself seems most reluctant to have. Because while it's uncomfortable to criticize a veteran receiver, it's genuinely alarming to watch what Judy's production failures are doing to a rookie quarterback who deserves a fair chance to develop without being quietly sabotaged by the people around him. Shedeur Sanders came into the NFL with real credentials. His college career showed a quarterback with exceptional accuracy, the ability to navigate complex defensive schemes, and a poise under pressure that most first-round picks don't possess until their third or fourth year. Cleveland drafted him because they believed he was the real thing. The question is whether they're actually giving him an environment where that can be proven. Every dropped pass Judy creates doesn't just erase a completion from the box score, it inflates Shedeur's incompletion numbers, it tanks his passer rating, it creates a version of his statistics that looks, to anyone who isn't watching the film carefully, like a struggling rookie quarterback who can't hit his targets. Analysts around the league look at his numbers and question his accuracy. Fans see the completion percentage and wonder if he's the real deal. Commentators reference his passer rating in ways that suggest the problem is coming from behind the center, and all the while the actual problem is standing 20 yards downfield, failing to close his hands around footballs that were delivered exactly where they needed to go. Think about what that does to a young quarterback psychologically and professionally. Every week, you're going out there and executing your reads, you're processing the defense, making smart decisions, delivering the ball with timing and placement that coaches spend entire film sessions praising, and then your stat line comes out and it looks like you're one of the worst quarterbacks in the league, because your passer rating when targeting your number one receiver is 44.2. Because every other throw you completed got erased from the efficiency conversation by the 5 balls that hit Judy's hands and fell to the ground. The most unfair part of this entire situation is that Shedeur has no control over what happens after the ball leaves his hand. He can put the ball in the perfect spot, on the perfect trajectory, at the perfect moment in the route, and once it leaves his fingertips, he's completely at the mercy of whoever is on the receiving end. When that person is reliably failing to secure the football, the quarterback absorbs every statistical consequence without having done anything wrong. That's not a development environment, that's a trap. Cleveland is asking a rookie to grow and improve while simultaneously making him statistically responsible for failures that aren't his. Defensive coordinators around the league have already started to notice. When opposing teams study film, they're seeing a Cleveland receiver room that can be dared to beat them deep because the underneath routes keep resulting in drops. They're seeing a quarterback whose statistical numbers suggest he struggles, even though the film tells a completely different story when you pay attention to where the ball is going and why it isn't being caught. Shedeur is being schemed against based on a statistical picture that Judy's drops have manufactured. That's how deep this problem goes. It doesn't just hurt completion percentages, it shapes how the entire league prepares to face Cleveland on a weekly basis. If there were any lingering doubt about where the real problem in Cleveland's passing game was located, Dillon Gabriel's numbers should remove it permanently. Because Gabriel, a rookie quarterback with a completely different playing style, different arm talent, and different decision-making tendencies from Shedeur Sanders, went out and produced nearly identical efficiency numbers when throwing to the same receiver room. And the similarity between those numbers isn't a coincidence, it's the clearest possible evidence that the quarterbacks were never the primary issue. Gabriel's passer rating when targeting Cleveland's receivers ranked second worst in the entire league, second worst, right behind Shedeur, who was the actual worst. Two rookie quarterbacks, two different skill sets, two completely different approaches to reading defenses and releasing the football, and both of them, throwing to the same group of receivers, produced historically terrible efficiency numbers. The common denominator in that equation isn't youth, it isn't inexperience, it isn't the coaching staff's play calling. The common denominator is the group of players standing at the other end of every throw, and Judy is sitting right at the center of that group.
This is the part of the analysis that should make every Cleveland fan genuinely angry, not at their quarterbacks, but at the situation those quarterbacks were placed in. When two different players with two different styles both produce the same historically bad results in the same environment, the environment itself is the problem, and Cleveland's front office built that environment. They assembled that receiver room. They wrote Judy's name into the starting lineup and kept it there, even as the evidence mounted week after week that the decision was actively harming both of their young quarterbacks' development. There has genuinely never been a greater gap in recent NFL history between what a quarterback brings to the table and what the receiver he's throwing to returns. Shedeur Sanders can read a defense, he can manipulate a safety, he can drop the ball into tight windows with timing that most veterans can't replicate, and all of that skill, all of that talent, all of that preparation gets converted into a 44.2 passer rating because the man catching the ball can't do his part. Dillon Gabriel had the same experience from the other side of the quarterback competition. Different player, same result. The receivers were the story all along. At some point, every organization reaches a moment of truth. It's the moment when the evidence becomes so overwhelming and so undeniable that continuing to ignore it isn't patience or loyalty, it's negligence. Cleveland's front office has reached that moment. The film has been there all season. The numbers have been published after every game. The drops have been counted, cataloged, and analyzed by anyone paying even minimal attention to what's been happening in that offense. There is no version of reality where the people running this franchise can claim they didn't see what was happening. The only question worth asking now is whether they have the courage to actually do something about it. Keeping Jerry Jeudy in that starting receiver room isn't a football decision at this point. It's a sunk cost decision. It's the organizational equivalent of refusing to change course because acknowledging the change means admitting the original course was wrong. Nobody in a front office wants to stand up and say they misjudged a player, that the investment didn't work out, that the guy they brought in to be the #1 option in a receiver room built around developing a franchise quarterback turned out to be the biggest obstacle standing between that quarterback and actual growth. But that's exactly what needs to be said, because that's exactly what happened. The argument for keeping Jeudy usually comes back to two things: his route running and his ability to create separation. And those arguments aren't wrong. He genuinely does those things at a high level. But here's the reality that those arguments consistently ignore. A receiver who creates perfect separation and then drops the ball is less valuable than a receiver who creates decent separation and actually catches it. Yards after the catch, touchdowns, and completed drives don't happen because a receiver ran a clean route. They happen because a receiver ran a clean route and then caught the football. Jeudy has spent 5 NFL seasons being elite at the first part and catastrophically unreliable at the second. You cannot build a passing game around a receiver whose defining characteristic is turning completed passes into turnovers and incompletions. Cleveland needs to look at what teams with functional passing offenses have in common. They have receivers who make contested catches. They have receivers who the quarterback can trust in crucial third down situations, knowing that if the ball gets there, the play is going to be made. They have receivers who, when the game is on the line and the drive needs to stay alive, are going to go down and catch the low ball instead of popping it straight up into a defender's arms. What Cleveland has right now is the opposite of all of that, and they have it at the #1 receiver position, the spot that's supposed to be the backbone of the entire passing offense. Shedeur Sanders is not going to get a second rookie year. He gets one chance to develop in a real environment, one window to build habits, confidence, and chemistry with the weapons around him. Every game that Jeudy spends in that lineup is a game where Sanders' development is being quietly undermined. Every dropped pass is a missed rep. Every turnover is a moment where a young quarterback has to push through the psychological weight of watching a catchable ball turn into points for the other team. That accumulates. It shapes how a quarterback develops, and Cleveland is allowing it to happen week after week while acting like the problem is somewhere else on the roster.
The front office has the film. They have the stats, they have the 5-year career record, they have the comparison between two rookie quarterbacks who both produced historically bad efficiency numbers in the same receiver room. They have all of the evidence that any reasonable organization would need to make a move. The only thing standing between them and the right decision is the willingness to make it. Here's what all of this comes down to when you strip away every excuse, every deflection, and every attempt to locate the problem somewhere other than where it actually lives. Cleveland has a franchise quarterback who is talented enough to win games in this league if he's given the right environment to operate in. They have draft capital, they have cap space, they have options. What they don't have is a first receiving option who can be trusted to catch the football when it matters. And until that changes, every good thing about this offense is going to keep getting buried under a wave of drops, turnovers, and wasted drives that could have been touchdowns. The movie, as people like to say, doesn't lie. Film study is the great equalizer in professional football because it doesn't respond to public relations and it doesn't care about contract values or draft pedigree or what a player was supposed to become when he came out of college. The film just shows you what actually happened, and what actually happened in Cleveland this season, play after play, week after week, is a receiver failing to do the one job he was hired to do at a frequency and consistency that doesn't belong anywhere near a starting NFL lineup. Jerry Jeudy has had every opportunity. He's had 5 years of NFL experience and every resource a professional receiver could ask for to develop his game and eliminate the reliability issues that have followed him from Denver to Cleveland. He's had patient coaching staffs, generous target shares, and now 2 different rookie quarterbacks who both went out of their way to involve him in the offense because the scheme demanded it. None of it has fixed the fundamental problem, and at some point, continuing to offer the same opportunities while expecting different results stops being faith in a player and starts being a disservice to everyone else on the roster who is doing their job correctly. Shedeur Sanders deserves better. The Cleveland fan base deserves better. The coaches who spent weeks putting together game plans designed to create clean throws for their receivers deserve to have those plans executed properly. The front office has a decision to make, and the numbers, the film, the history, and the logic of the situation are all pointing in exactly the same direction. Cleveland cannot keep pretending this situation is sustainable. The evidence has been stacking up for 5 years, and this season it finally reached a level that can't be dismissed. What happens next is on the front office. The information is there, the case has been made, now it's time to see whether the people running this franchise are going to face the truth that their own film room has been showing them all season, or whether they're going to keep writing the same name into the same lineup while a talented young quarterback pays the price for a decision that should have been reversed weeks ago. The numbers don't lie, the film doesn't lie, and Cleveland can't afford to keep lying to itself. If you made it this far and you're a Browns fan who's been seeing this all season, you already know everything said here is true. Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with someone who still thinks the quarterback is the problem, and if Cleveland's front office is paying attention, the clock is ticking.